Hi everyone, and welcome to the bi-monthly grab bag video. As always, this video will be an assortment of smaller projects and clips that normally wouldn't merit their own video, but I still thought were cool and are worth including. Also, if you're a $5 patron or higher, you get to suggest topics and ask questions which will be featured in these videos. Before we jump into the main content, last week I promised a new piece of merch and I'm so excited to unveil it. Drumroll please. This poster covers most of the content from last week's video, and I might be biased, but I think it came out looking great. If you'd like to snag one for yourself, they're available in my store on Redbubble. Link in the description. While you're there, be sure to check out some of the other cool designs that are already up. Also, if you've got suggestions for designs or have a video that you want to get the poster treatment like this, be sure to let me know in the comments. Okay, with that out of the way, let's jump right in. First up, you may have noticed that there was a missing video last month. This is because I was at Bodyhacking Con. Bodyhacking Con is a convention that is meant to highlight innovations in the world of biohacking, prosthetics, and human augmentation. There was a lot of great talks, and as always, I met a ton of awesome people. There was too much to possibly cover, and also I may have forgotten a film because I was distracted by all the cool stuff, so here's some of my favorite bits. First up, I need to give a big shout out to my friend Rich Lee. He gave a talk about the future of sex and some of his work on the Lovetron 9000, and I can honestly say it was an awesome talk. Easily one of the best from the weekend. I've put a link to the full talk in the description. Another highlight had to be the talk given by Stellark. If you haven't heard of him, he's a performance artist who's done all sorts of crazy stuff, from building a suit that let other people control his body to implanting a special ear-shaped dissolvable scaffold in his arm. He's known as the original grinder, and it's not hard to see why. From robotics to biology to suspension, his work covers an incredible breadth of topics, though he makes a point that the only purpose of what he does is art. While the rest of the con was certainly not uneventful, those were my favorite bits. Oddly enough, the least interesting talk was actually the keynote speaker from DARPA. The tech he was showing off was old, and the content was noticeably dated. Lots of boring CG animations, and nothing actually that noteworthy that I hadn't seen go by on Facebook years ago. That said, if you get a chance, I'd highly recommend checking out the conference next year. It's always a blast, and I'm already looking forward to the next one. While I was in university, one of my favorite places on campus had to be the greenhouses. My school maintained several tropical greenhouses full of exotic plants that were open to the public. Since many of the plants are research specimens, it's important that they get pollinated so that they can produce seeds. But how do you pollinate hundreds of exotic plants? You import thousands of butterflies, of course. Once a year, they would release a massive variety of butterflies into the greenhouses so that they could pollinate the plants, and they would allow visitors to walk through and see them all fluttering around. In my last year, I happened to be around while they were still setting up, so I got to see it before the crowds did, and it was really amazing. So many species dancing through the air, it was fun to just wander around and follow them as they flew. At one point, I also got to meet the guy who took care of the greenhouse, and he's a great guy. At one point, he gave me a cutting from one of the jasmine plants so I could take it home and try rooting it. He's also the one responsible for preparing all of the butterfly cocoons and setting up the butterfly show. So if you're ever in Ottawa in October, be sure to head over to the Carleton campus and see one of the coolest things my old school had to offer. Our first question for this episode comes from Anatoly Bazarov. He writes, "Why doesn't something like a ChemWiki project exist? That is, a single encyclopedia that aims to collect all the information possible about each substance, different routes to its synthesis, and information such as solubility in different solvents. Is it that chemists simply don't embrace the same sharing is caring ideals that electronics hobbyists do?" Great question. So, turns out that such a thing does exist, kind of. There's a service called ChemCloud, which is a huge collection of databases of chemicals and reactions, and it allows you to put in a chemical structure and see a ton of information about it, and its synthesis. But as you might expect, it's behind a $2,000 paywall. So it does exist, it's just that the access is restricted. There are some other online databases that do similar things as well, but they're all behind paywalls as far as I know. Also, as to why there's not a lot of sharing, I mean there is in the form of academic journals, but for some things I'd say it's the same reason that, say, industrial electronic designers don't share the minutiae of how they make their chips. It's usually to protect their IP. I'd like to think that there's lots of chemists who'd be open to having a readily available database like that, but the old academic systems are still in place, so if they need it, they usually just go through their university and don't think about it. I do hope that this changes, though, and that a free and public version is made available. Anyone who knows me and my friends know that we love ferments, be it wine, pickles, sauerkraut, or kimchi. If you can ferment it, we've probably tried it. The thing with ferments is that for some of them, the longer you ignore them, the better they get. Nothing is a better example of this than Moroccan brine lemons. To make them, all you need is some lemons, some salt, and some water. First, cut the lemon as if you're going to quarter it lengthwise, but don't cut all the way through. You just want 4 deep cuts. Gently pry the cut open and stuff it full of some good coarse sea salt.
Pro tip, do not do this with any open wounds.
Then drop the lemon into the jar it'll be fermenting in. Repeat this until the jar is mostly full of lemons. At that point, pack the lemons into the jar tightly by squishing them down a little bit. Now we need to get a little bit of liquid in here, so cut a few lemons in half and juice them. The juice from about 2 to 3 lemons should be sufficient. Then a little bit of distilled water on top and these are ready to go. Just cap it and forget about it. You don't need to inoculate these as there's plenty of bacteria on the lemons. You should leave the jar cracked a bit though so it doesn't explode and so that a bit of air can get in. These are ready after about a month, but if you leave them as long as 2 years, they get even better. As they age, the lemons go so soft that you can eat them skin and all. They're absolutely amazing on a variety of meats and can take a dish from great to stellar very easily. We have a ton of ferment recipes like this, so if stuff like this is interesting, I can make more in-depth videos on making a variety of foods, beverages, and spreads. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, let me know if you've tried some of these before and what you thought. Our last question for this episode comes from Michael Chatzidakis. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. He writes, what do you think about synthetic meat, i.e. in-vitro meat? Any projected timeline on when you think it'll hit the mainstream? Do you think it's a case that the tech is mature but politics are holding it back? For those not familiar, in-vitro meat is the idea that you can take a tissue sample from a cow or other animal, culture the cells artificially in a dish or a vat, and grow it into enough material to produce entire meat products. Most of the time they focus on ground beef because then it doesn't need to look pretty, but I've heard of attempts to grow larger items. In terms of when it could hit commercial markets, we could be looking as early as this or next year. There are a bunch of companies that are chasing this down hard and are making great strides. They are consistently able to grow the material and have brought the price down from thousands and thousands that it cost to do it the first time to the $10 to $20 range last I heard. And there's not much politically blocking them. Most people are actually excited by the concept, though of course traditional farming groups won't be happy about it. Personally, I'm really excited for the technology. I see it as a great balance between people getting to maintain their habits, while simultaneously being much easier on the environment and using far less resources. It does, however, open up a bunch of really weird doors. What happens if we use a different animal as the source of cells? Could it mean that stores will carry meats made from exotic creatures like dolphins or bears without actually harming any animals? What about if human is used as the source? Is it still cannibalism if no one was killed or harmed for it? I don't have an easy answer to that, but I'm excited to see how things play out. For all I know, in a few years, the local grocer might be carrying caribou eyeballs, just like in Transmet. Finally, to wrap this episode up, I want to finish with a quick preview. This is P. stypticus. It's a species of fungi, also known as a bitter oyster mushroom. My sample was sent to me from a friend, but you can get it just as easily on Amazon. We'll be using it as one of the fungal inoculants in our ongoing pursuit to bioremediate our yard. Now, a tube of white mycelium may not seem interesting, but when you turn off the lights, it gets much more exciting. This species is best known for its bioluminescent properties and glows a lovely shade of green. Here's a long exposure taken in total darkness, overlaid on top of one taken in light so that you can see where it's glowing the most. For the sake of full disclosure, the glow isn't very bright and you need to be in total darkness to see it. But once your eyes have adjusted, it does noticeably glow. I keep a sample in my bedroom, and at night I can clearly see the glow from across the room. So be sure to keep an eye out for the longer video on this awesome species, and hopefully the day when our entire yard glows in the dark. And with that, I'll wrap up this video. If you've enjoyed and want to see more, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to see when I post new videos. As always, a big thank you to my patrons who help make these videos possible. Your continued support is a major reason why I can continue to make these weekly videos for you. That's all for now, and I'll see you next week.